Hello.
Hello. Hi.
Hey. So I'm Jodie Moore on behalf of the DUB campaign, and I'd like to welcome my guest, Tim Coxon from the University of Brighton. So hi, Tim.
Hello. Hi.
So you're an accredited UN climate change teacher. What does that entail?
Yes, okay. So I work in the School of Education. I'm a lecturer in the School of Education. And I recently completed the United Nations Climate Change Teacher Accreditation. What that means is that I've completed a short course or giving me some basic background in terms of climate change with the view to using that knowledge to support teachers and educationalists in the School of Education to teach climate change programs to children and young people.
Brilliant. So what are your opinions of the ongoing divestment movement?
So I have some awareness of the divestment movement, and I've certainly sort of seen in the news different organisations divesting from fossil fuel companies as well as other less ethical businesses. I think it's a very worthy way forward. I don't know what the practical achievements are in terms of reduction in carbon emissions, because I'm not sure the impact it has directly on carbon emissions. However, I think it sends a very strong message about the concern that organisations have for the climate crisis, and I think it gives a sort of a vote of faith in the move towards carbon neutral economies in the future, and hopefully the near future.
Absolutely. So the University of Brighton has money tied into pension funds that subsidise fossil fuels. Given your knowledge of the climate crisis, do investments in fossil fuels worry you?
I think yes. I mean, investments in fossil fuels worry me. I think pension funds are very large organisations, or very large organisations that need to be encouraged towards divesting from fossil fuels. I think the University of Brighton has several pension funds, and so in the School of Education I'm part of the Teachers' Pension Fund, which it doesn't invest in the stock market. So that's a pension fund which it seems unlikely that it's got fossil fuel holdings.
That one does actually have fossil fuel holdings.
Okay, well, I wasn't aware of that, so I'd be interested to know a bit more about that. I guess, you know, how can that pension fund be encouraged to change and to divest? And I think you know, these aren't directly controlled by the University of Brighton, so I think the University of Brighton may well need to just make some. Perhaps it'd be helpful to give some indication to fossil investing pension funds that that's something they would rather not have. But I don't know what the alternatives are, because you know, people do need pensions, and we do need to encourage pension funds to be responsible in terms of the climate.
There are new pension funds. Sorry, there are new pension funds coming out that are not investing in fossil fuels. So the alternatives are there. Anyway, shall I move on?
Yeah, do. I mean, I'd like to just sort of caveat that with, you know, it's an area that the university's investments in or the university's use of pension funds. I don't have much detail on that, and I'd be interested to learn more about that. But that's not my area of sort of expertise, I guess, as a climate change teacher. Has been around curriculum and pedagogy and so on, and work in those areas. And this is certainly an area in which I'd like to learn more and be more aware of.
Sure. Sue, do you believe the divestment movement is an effective way to combat climate change?
I'm not sure on how we judge that question. So I think in terms of does divestment reduce carbon emissions, I'm not sure whether that is a direct outcome of divestment, because I think that there's plenty of other forms of revenue for companies and for for highly, for big companies like Exxon, for example. I'm sure that that divestment might have an impact, but I'm not sure what impact it has on them, because they don't seem short of funds. And at the moment we're in a very strange situation in terms of the way in which oil is piling up and companies having to cut production and so on. What happens next in terms of how carbon emissions go related to fossil fuels? It's pretty unclear, isn't it? So I don't know. I mean, I've read articles sort of arguing both ways. One arguing that perhaps that fossil fuels, that divestment doesn't have a direct impact on climate, but another one saying, well, actually, it at least provides a kind of a sort of a vote of faith in the future. So I think it's a really complex area, and I suppose there'd be many ways of trying to make change in the world that have have other effects, don't they? So do we know what the sort of what will happen next with divestment in terms of where will these companies go, where will funding come from, and so on? So I wonder whether there may well be other sort of side effects of the divestment one, which we haven't quite captured yet.
Yeah, it's possible. So, would you personally prefer to be part of a pension scheme that doesn't have ties with fossil fuels?
Yes, I suppose so. I mean, yes, definitely. I mean, I'd like to be part of a pension scheme that doesn't have ties to fossil fuels. That'd be really good. I'm not aware of the. I suppose with something like teachers' pensions, I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of teachers who, and an absolutely massive fund. And I would like to see some transparency around the investments that the companies have. But I'm slightly puzzled because I was unaware that the pensions invest in the stock market. So I'm not quite sure where the fossil footprint or fossil fuel carbon footprint comes from for the teachers' pensions. So I'm sort of slightly that's sort of new information for me. So I'd be interested to know how it can change.
Sure, I can send you something afterwards that shows where their investments are. So lastly, what industries do you think make the most sense to invest in for a safer future?
Well, I suppose industries which have a chance to change the world. So, and I guess a lot of those sorts of industries, disruptive ones. So I guess there's some people talk about sort of those food companies which are producing meat-free substitutes as one way forward, because that then releases some of the big carbon and methane producing agriculture that we have, which is also very problematic. So I think investment in those sorts of organisations that are going to disrupt the current sort of financial system that we have would be ways forward. But I suppose I'm also aware that those sorts of organisations tend to be quite small at the moment, and they're growing, and therefore are in need of investment. But a massive investment fund like a pension, I guess they need ways of investing in organisations which can, take that huge amount of capital which they need to perhaps reinvest. And I'm no expert in that. So I suppose my initial thought is yes, things which are industries for the future. So I would suppose things which point us towards more renewable energy sources, more sustainable ways of feeding ourselves, more sustainable ways of heating our houses and heating water, and moving away from gas, which seems to be taking over from or being a significant part now of the energy mix in the UK, thankfully moving away from coal, but still we've got to move further. Yes, so those are my initial thoughts around that.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time and for supporting our divestment campaign. and have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Right.